Good morning, everyone, and another live with Lee this week, but this one is our voice chat Fridays with the remarkable and internationally known voice AI designer, Shyamala Prayaga. And if those of you who don't know her, let me be the first to tell you that she's the voice, not the voice, but the voice designer, conversational AI designer behind Ford's autonomous vehicle line. She is also the founder and on a mission to get more people trained and to do what she does, the founder of DA Academy, Digital Assistant Academy, which helps people learn how to design voice AI. So welcome again, Shyamala.
Thank you so much, Lee. It's my pleasure.
This has been one heck of a week, hasn't it? Just groundbreaking. I think people are exhausted. And for those of you who have joined us today, we really and truly thank you for being here. So we're going to start right off with talking with Shyamala this week. We're going to take your questions. So please do put in the comments on whatever platform you're using, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Shyamala is here to answer your questions. Until we start seeing specific questions, I'm going to ask her my questions and other questions that have been posed to me throughout the week. So just a casual conversation, you know, with somebody who can change a life. You know, and it's true. So I really want to understand why you started the Academy. What's the mission behind that? Because that's a huge investment of time and, financial, equity, and it's tremendous. Why would you work two full-time jobs and only get paid for one?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So the other one is my passion for sure. So I have been in the voice tech industry for a very long time. And, my journey started with Amazon, where I was part of the Gen 1 and Gen 2 of Alexa. And then I worked with VoiceBox Technologies, where I worked on some of their speech-enabled products, which were for smart home and smart speakers, and now here at Ford Motor Company. So throughout, I saw there's a lot of knowledge gap when it comes to how to design. For me, it was a self-learning because I had no formal training or education, and there were none available when I started my career. So I think about it as a user experience many years back. When many years back user experience started, it was all over the place. We had different terms. There was nothing common about it. We were not in compliance with anything, even the terminology. Some used to call it human computer interaction, some used to call it usability engineering, and all sorts of things. Even the process was all over the place until we got the lean UX design thinking and such processes in place. Officially, around 2008, 2009, UX was coined, and since then, there has been a process and structure. And I feel voice is in the same boat right now, where it's all over the place. There are multiple platforms available. There are no set processes. Every company uses its own processes and its own tools. And there's a huge knowledge gap when it comes to how to design such things. So we need some sort of structure. We need some sort of standards. We need some sort of process in place. And given my experience and background with UX plus the design of the voice technologies, what I realized is it's easy to teach that thing through some sort of training, right? I'm not here to just give you ABC training, which will just be some training which will give you the concepts and all, but I'm here to teach you how to think like a voice designer, thinking about all the ins and out we talk about. So that is the reason why I started my Digital Assistant Academy, to standardize learning of voice interactions.
So, boy, that actually was a mouthful. So I want to go back to your Amazon Gen 1 and Gen 2, the Alexa Gen 1 and Gen 2. I also think, Shyamala, that how do we create people who have those skills, the voice design skills, if they're not in a company that does voice design, that doesn't include conversational design within their products? And we know that that's the direction that people are going toward. What happens to UX practitioners? What happens to those people who don't? Do you think that it's that imperative to learn, even if you're not currently working on voice products. Is
It
that
will
right?
at some point. Yeah, it will at some point. Think about it like mobile applications. Many years back, it was not even a prerequisite to have any kind of mobile knowledge, right? I started as a UX designer. I still remember my interview with Kony Solutions, where my mobile application journey started. And when I was in the interview, the founder asked me, like, "Hey, uh, everything is great, but you don't have any mobile experience. So why should we hire you?" And
And
at that point,
when was that, Shyamala?
it was around 2009
Yeah.
time frame when mobile applications were picking up. And my answer was pretty straightforward. I told him, like, well, it's just a modality change. I worked on web applications and websites. So it's just a modality change. How hard it could be for me to learn something like that. And they got impressed and they offered me right away. But then we don't have that flexibility now. It's okay in the initial stages to have that kind of flexibility where you are able to show your growth mindset and learning mindset and say, like, yes, I will learn this thing and I can learn this thing, or I have the ability. But as the industry is picking up so fast, you don't have that kind of flexibility to learn while on the job. So having a skill set like this would be beneficial because hey, you can work for any big companies if you desire to, or you can start your own company. Voice and conversational AI provides you that kind of flexibility that you can create so many apps and so many stuffs. I have a colleague at Ford. He's a developer. His day job is developer, and he develops mobile applications just for fun. And he was able to pull off, like his monthly mortgages, and he bought one of the most advanced version of Ford cars, and everything, all of his expenses are paid off because of the monetization. The money he gets because of his mobile app. So he's still doing his full time job and doing it. So it's such skill.
Wait a minute. So wait a minute. So wait, is that his side gig?
Yes, it is. And with his side gig, he's able to do that. So there are so many people out there like that. So this is something which is like an added skill set for you and can help you no matter what. And another benefit, which knowing how to design voice applications and how to think about the processes and tools and everything would be beneficial in the long run, because you are already ready for any companies. And soon it will become where the job description would request or require you to have 2 to 4 years of experience. But how do you bring that experience?
All right. So I'm impressed. I can't believe that you worked on the first and second generation of Alexa. So was that the US version, or was that elsewhere?
It was the US version.
It was the US version. Wow. So what are so when you're looking at voice, if somebody were to say, I want to start working on voice products that include voice design, what types of skills would they need throughout the design process, right? From concept to delivery, what are the skill sets that people need for various labor categories? So you've got visual, we know about visual design, we know about development. Are there other skills that these folks should consider?
Yeah, definitely. So user experience is critical. Interaction design, knowing how to design the interactions for one modality helps to design for other, right? Like if the user said something, how do you respond back through visual or multimodal or audible format? So that is important. But the bigger part of voice interaction design or conversation design is the dialogue itself, a conversation between a human and a bot. If you have to make it as human as possible or natural as possible, knowing some level of linguistics definitely helps. And there are many people out there who come from linguistics background into this industry not knowing the UX side of things. So for a UX designer, knowing a part of linguistics definitely helps. You don't have to do a degree, you don't have to do any such things. There are a lot of great resources out there. We've started our own link to linguistics, where the key concepts of linguistics which are essential for conversation design, we post some explanation description about those topics. So there are a lot of great resources out there like that where you can learn from about linguistics. Another part is knowing how the technology works in general. Last week we spoke about how the technology works, and we discussed the different speech recognition system, the ASA and ASR, NLP, and all of those things. So knowing that really is beneficial, because the moment you know how the technology works, similar to UX design, right? If you know the technology and how it works, it becomes really easy for you to design the solution. In this case, it is important because you are going to design a natural language solution. So knowing the different tech challenges, limitations are important, but at the same time knowing the terminologies like intent, slots, utterances, agents, all of these things, which are the terminologies used in conversation design, are also important to know. So knowing the technology will be helpful. Again, research background is beneficial. Throughout, you will have to have a research mindset and constantly have a human centered design approach. So knowing the research, how to test out the voice interactions during the early stages, during the later stages, during the final stages, and even during the initial stages, trying to collect the information or the viability of the product, all of those are really important. So that skill set is important. uh, UX writing could be a good skill set to have. You may not have the UX writing skill set always, right? But you can always learn. If many people come from UX writing or content writing background as well, and they work their way backwards to learn the other aspects. Not that you will be creating like technical things out there. As a designer, you will create dialogues or voice flows and do research and stuff like that, or create the voice interactions, but you're not going to prototype them. So you also need to be able to work very closely with the developer, similar to UX, know how to present yourself, defend yourself, and uh, things like that. Pretty much similar to how you would do with UX design, working with your stakeholders.
So there seems to be an awful lot of crossover.
For sure.
So what has changed since you first started working on the early gens of Alexa to today? What has been the most significant change, either in the process, the technology, or the people that you have to engage with?
It's a process, I would say incremental progress for each of these things. Technology has evolved. We are more natural language now. We are able to do turn taking and stuffs like that as well. Earlier the technology was not capable of some of these things, so there were restrictions or limitations even for a designer to think about a moonshot vision, right? Then the natural language piece itself, where you are able to make it more natural. And a lot has evolved since then. When like the initial days, we used to use Excel sheets to create the voice scripts and stuff like that. Now there are great conversational platforms available out there. You can just use quickly such platforms to prototype your voice interactions and quickly test them out with your end users. And VoiceFlow has gone one step beyond, where they allow you to not only just create these interactions, but also deploy it to the device of your choice, including your custom assistant, and test it out. So there are great, such tools available out there, which is helping. Also, there's a lot of people who are now there. Then people who were available many years back. So there's a lot of wealth of knowledge available out there as well in terms of the skill sets.
Okay, so I'm taking notes for everybody who's watching. I'm putting the comments that I'm literally taking notes as she's talking, because I think that these are important. If you're going to interview for one of these positions, these are questions that you need to be digging down in that interview. Or if you're looking at making a career change, these are things that you need to look at that training program for. Do they address all of this? Are they using the latest technology? Are we talking about voice flow? Are we talking about the technology that allows me to go from concept to prototype, right to that platform? So these are all critical things. I do want to touch back on. So I think that some people would say that UX did have a process initially, back in the Mr. Alan Cooper days, and back in all these other things, and they actually look down on lean UX because it really takes away some of that research. And I know you and I have had this conversation before, that there's always a place and a time for varying your approach, right? but we don't sacrifice research in AI design. How is that? Is it different at all in terms of is user research? How does it vary from a typical, mobile app product launch? There's got to be some variations in it. And think, Shyamala, like if you were interviewing somebody, how would you know that they knew how to research for quality voice conversational AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first of all, yeah, there were processes available out there even before lean UX and design thinking. I wouldn't deny that UX is a very old discipline now. But then there were glitches throughout the process. It felt too lengthy to go through a certain process always, right? And that is why we were looking for something more feasible because given the way it was very difficult for many people to actually follow all of the process. So we were always fighting the battle of ROI of UX,
Ah,
right?
that is
So
where that came in, right? That's the whole reason
yeah,
for lean UX. And
and
as
that is why the other processes came into the play.
yeah,
Now what is different when it comes to research in a voice interaction space? Well, depends on your product, depends on your service, right? When I used to work for VoiceBox Technologies and we were designing a smart home solution, so I did focus group with a bunch of people just to understand if there will be need for such kind of thing, like are people willing to use voice applications or smart home systems? And we got a lot of interesting insights out there, for sure, from the people. And we did some interviews as well. So see, you have to do the same kind of things you're doing, like testing the viability of the product early on, or understanding the user's mindset and their psyche to know whether they'll be using, are they the right kind of target audience for your product or not. So you are doing those same kind of research, but you're also doing a stakeholder research as well, or stakeholder evaluation here. For example, if you are creating a pizza bot or a pizza like application where Alexa or any voice assistant is able to order pizza on your behalf, you have to think about all the different stakeholders in this case, right? Who are my stakeholders? Maybe you, as a UX designer, you're not thinking too much about the technical things like what is my backend system and all of those, but you're still thinking about your stakeholders, the same kind of things, right? If I have to design a pizza bot, then what kind of service are we using, what kind of payment services are we using, and what kind of challenges will we face. So if the user said, I want to order 4 pizzas or whatever, right? So we need to know all the different kind of things which users will ask throughout. Like when they said they want to order 4 pizza, we need to know all of the information, like do they want large pizza, do they want small pizza, do they want any sides with it, and all of those kind of things. So we need to know if our system is capable of all of these kind of things, or does our service provider offer these things or not. So there's always the same kind of things you have to think about, right? But at the same time, thinking about the messaging of your entire thing and making sure it aligns with the brand values, which is important. So you also have to work with your other stakeholders, maybe legal in some cases, because you also need to make sure that you are collecting the right kind of information. In this case, the intent of the user is just to order a pizza, right? But you need to know their location information, you need to know their payment information, you need to know all the tie-ins, with the service providers, and how the payment will be taken care of, and all sorts of things. So as a designer, you are doing all the kind of things, and now also researching, like if you are asking the user for their location information, or if you are asking them for payment information, will they be worried? Or will they be flexible enough, like, yeah, I'm okay to give my payment information through a voice system or such things, right? So really thinking about all of those things are important, and testing them out early out to see how the user feels about a system like this, so that you're not setting yourself up for a failure or failed product.
okay, these things would make my head spin. So we're not just talking about a typical mobile app, here. We are talking about we have to design with human thought process, not just functionality, right? Which is also part of a thought process. But when you talk about voice, you're talking about really getting into the weeds. about how they behave so many steps
So
down
many
the
steps.
line.
Yeah. It's not linear, right? For mobile app, there could be like A, B, or C, different variations. Maybe to order pizza, you may search for a pizza and then you would select and add it to the cart and then check out. Or maybe you will browse through a list of pizzas and then you will select which pizza you want and then add it to the cart and then check out, right? So in a mobile or web version, you will have only a certain interactions, very linear, like there could be two or three paths. But with voice, it could go all over the place. I can say, Alexa, I want to order pizza, right? Now, I don't know anything else. So I want to now collect more information from you. So I will have to ask you, how many pizza? For how many people? Okay, large or small, thin crust or thick crust, and all sorts of things, whatever information you need before you can even fulfill the request, including if I don't have your location information, I might have to ask your location information or payment information, right? There are people are different and they talk, every person talks differently. Maybe the second person says something like this: I want to order pizza I want to order a thick crust pizza for 4 people and I want it by 4 p.m. And also add 2 sides and also add Pepsi to it, right? Someone can say something like this. Now, how does your system interpret this? Remember, the machine is taking your spoken words, converting into a machine readable format, and then taking out and identifying the different intents out of it, and then making sense. So there's a lot going on here. So there could be people who speak very less, there could be people who speak a lot. You need to balance your interactions accordingly. Your dialogue system cannot be the same. Your dialogue system have to be designed accordingly. So these are all critical kind of things, and you will have to design out the different variations of how an interaction can flow, test it out, make sure it is not breaking, and then going forward from there.
I couldn't even begin to do your job, Shyamala. I think that that's very clear at the end of this session. I couldn't begin to. So,
Everyone has their own expertise.
well, it's like you're tattletaling on me, quite frankly, because last night I ordered a pizza, something I haven't done in a very, very long time. And so I ordered it on my mobile app. And you're right, it was actually 3 steps, exactly 3 steps to order that pizza. Now I'm thinking that if there was no web page and everything was voice activated, the creator of that technology would have to include every single word on that web page, right? Or that mobile app screen for me to, and then that voice designer will also have to anticipate the questions that I might ask or the additional features or the additional things that I want in addition to the pizza, because they sell a whole lot more than just pizza. So now how long does it take to do? That to me would take like a year and a half to create, to go from a mobile page versus just all voice activated.
It depends. It's an incremental process, right? So you will try to create small features at a time, test it out, and then add on to it. It's not very complicated or lengthy process. If you know how to design and if you know the right kind of processes and you know how to design the solutions early on, test it out, and things like that. What takes time is the technical things. What is your architecture? What is your service provider? Or who's your service provider? Getting sign-offs from the legal and all of those things. Creating interactions with these tools, it's like your wireframes, right? You can create wireframes pretty quickly, but you're always thinking about how the user would do. Like what I do is I do a lot of natural language studies in the beginning, where I collect the different ways the user can say something, and then taking those, I try to create the different dialogue models. One where the user is giving me all of the information at once, or one where the user has given me zero information or very little information, and I have to, dive deeper to get the information from the user because every user is different. But also thinking about the other aspects and designing the systems, and that is where the sample dialogues comes into play. Create quick dialogues and then test it out with your colleagues and see if it is making sense even before you prototype. Like we do paper prototyping, just sketch out something on the screen, right? When you sketch out, you are able to see how the interaction may flow and then do it. So it's pretty much similar kind of things which you'll be doing with voice as well. It's the implementation which takes time, and like getting sign-offs.
So you just mentioned something that's probably making some of our listeners' hair stand on end. You said test with your colleagues. Do you test with your colleagues before you test with your users, or are you looking at, so everybody orders a pizza, so you should be able to test with somebody in the hall, right? I mean, what's the thinking behind that?
See, voice is such a thing which everyone and almost everyone have tried in their life, right? So we have, and the benefit. I mean, we did this with Amazon as well. Like all over the place, come from different background, different languages, and like have different dialects or different accents and all of those kind of things. We all are eventually the end user of the product at any point of time. So if your colleague is not directly linked to your product, there will be very little biases if you are testing them out with them. But the benefit is you are getting a lot of user base early on to test with, within your company, so you don't have to go outside and find someone to do it. Because uh, imagine pizza ordering. I will also order it, my colleagues will also order it. If we designed a solution and test it out with them, we do corridor testing, right? Where you're like, hey, I'll just play out this dialogue with you, just let me know how do you feel the sound of it. Or you can just enact the user part of it, I'll enact the system part of it, and see how the dialogue flows. And those are like very early kind of testings which you can do to find out how things work. When
So
I
now,
was
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I want to stop you right there, because now you're talking about looking at a product that, let's just say 80%, using the 80-20 rule, 80% of people at some point will order out, right? And they'll use their mobile app. So if it were to become, say, more specific, like if that voice or that mobile product or any product becomes very specific to a targeted audience, that's when it's really critical that we hone in sooner than later on testing with those users. But something like a mobile app that is voice activated for pizza, the majority of us do that. Is that the thinking there?
Kind of. So when the Gen 1 of Alexa was being designed, it was a secret project. So we cannot go and test it out with end users at
Uh,
all because,
I didn't think about that.
yeah. So there are things like that. Sometimes you are designing something which is confidential. You don't want to, leak it out early on. So what Amazon did was had other members from the other departments who have no knowledge or idea about what we are working on the product, right? And then did a lot of usability testing with these people for music and shopping list and other kind of domains which were the early domains of Amazon launch. So collected a lot of data. Now for the Gen 2, what they did was they had these small dots, and they had people, I was part of that beta testing. So they had people sign up for beta testing and take the device to their home, and they were constantly using these devices and testing out different kind of interactions and things like that. And based on that, they were constantly collecting the data to improve, and they wanted to make sure the product is out in a perfect condition, in a condition which is acceptable for their brand and their values, or for the users as well. So those are quick way to test out your interactions and constantly collect the right kind of data, right? If your colleague is not part of your project or has no idea about it, I mean, you cannot just go to your product manager or your designer or your developer and say like test this out. They will have a lot of biases. But you can always do it with other people who have no idea about it, maybe your
Yeah,
HR or maybe your finance folks.
yeah, I didn't even think about that. The confidentiality of the product launch itself. I remember working on some, staffing some teams that were working on some very confidential products for one of our very large clients, Gillette at the time, and they were secluded behind doors, I mean, locked in place. So their user testers actually had to start from within as well. They couldn't go external because of the risk of that. I did not even think of that until now. So believe it or not, we are at our 30-minute mark, Shyamala.
Wow.
And we don't have any other questions to ask, but I think because we have the lowest common denominator in this conversation, that would be me right here. You know, a lot of questions that people are afraid to ask, I have absolutely no shame to ask. So I would say that if you're, you know, watching, jot down these notes that I took, because these are the things that you need to prepare yourself for as you learn this skill. And if you're interviewing for a job, you know, Shyamala is a hiring manager. So I would say whatever would be important for Shyamala to hear about how you approach these things is an important thing to prepare for. And so I think next week, can we talk more about what hiring managers are looking for and the questions, specific questions, and maybe you can walk us through something in your portfolio and how you would present it to somebody, because I think that'll help people prepare if they're interested in moving in this direction or beefing up their portfolios. So does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's do it.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We know that it's early, but look at how much you learned in 30 minutes. So 30-minute lessons are a beautiful way to start the day. Shyamala, thank you so much for sharing your time. You're so generous with your knowledge, and we greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.